All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Richard Maxwell, and we are here for another live stream podcast of the Creative Musical Arts and Sciences program here at Arcadia High School. It is February 5th, right? 5th? Yeah. It's February 5th, 2021. We are pretty much still in the world of our pandemic. And we've been doing podcasts and live stream concerts pretty much every week, just about every week since March when we've been in session. And it's been a pretty cool opportunity to talk to students and other folks and just share some opinions and thoughts and whatnot. And today will be no different, hopefully. I'm joined by some pretty wonderful folks here, some students, our student teacher, and we are going to talk a little bit about fame, as it were, as a starting point in this conversation. But I also wanted to talk about kind of how things for artists and creative people change based on circumstance and when maybe the fan base doesn't necessarily understand or approve or appreciate, but they do it anyway. And just to give everybody context, we this week in class we did a thing with the Beatles, and they are kind of like the Bible, if you will, on so many things in the music industry for a lot of reasons. But we were specifically talking about how they at one point very deliberately decided they were done touring, they were done performing live, not done as a band. That will obviously, well, not obviously, but if you know the history, that comes later. But they definitely just stopped. They said we are finished with this live performance thing. Um, and we talked about it as a class. I wanted to go into a little bit more depth with you guys as a group, and I wanted to start with this notion that, first of all, I mean, and obviously it's all relative, and there's a lot of opinion in what I'm about to say, but I always am struck sort of, despite everything that you can argue that the Beatles accomplished in the studio, even before they stopped touring, but certainly after. I mean, those last albums are remarkable. I mean, you could argue every Beatle album is remarkable, but those in particular. But I'm always sort of struck by the fact that, like, I have a hard time getting my own mindset into this place where I'm like, if I was that good of a live act, which arguably they were a phenomenally gifted live band, to just walk away from that strikes me as so, like, there had to have been like some regret. But then I think about the things we talked about in class over the last week, and I'm like, was there regret? Maybe they were just like, you know what, this is just, I'm done giving it all I can. I'm wondering what you think about that possibility. Like, is there some sort of remorse element when an artist makes a change of that nature? Or do you get to a point where you just don't care? It's so frustrating that you don't feel like you have a choice. What do you think?
I mean, I think it all depends on like the reasons why they quit, you know? Because like for the Beatles, it was just too out of hand, and the technology at the time wasn't advanced enough to keep up with how much people started showing up to their shows, you know? Like physically, they could not perform good enough. Like no, they performed good enough, but like it wasn't able to uh, reach the audience, you know, because there's so many people.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the fact that they quit was like it has reason to it. I could get like, yeah, you might get remorseful on it, like missing it, but at the same time, if you have to deal with just like crappy shows or just because it's like not doable anymore, then I don't think there'd be an amount of regret because at that point it's not your fault.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? Any
I
any
mean, personally,
commentary?
like pertaining to the Beatles, they kind of know what they're doing, obviously, since they worked so hard for a long time. So if they decide to quit, it's probably not just like, oh, maybe this was the right idea, maybe this wasn't. They probably knew it was best for them. So I would just trust the
Well,
decision for different artists too.
does that okay? So this is where the Beatles become tricky, as far as I'm concerned, because I think you have a valid point, but there's also this tendency. I do it myself all the time. that we kind of just look at them in hindsight, decades later. It's really hard to point out, like, on balance, like that they were flawed in some capacity. Yeah, I mean, everybody, there's mistakes and there's things that could have gone better and whatever, and nothing's ever perfect, but they're so, like, so much of what they did was so good that it's kind of easy to sort of, I feel like you're letting them off the hook, I guess is my point, a little bit. I'm not saying you're not allowed to. I'm just not sure. Like, I'm wondering, like, is there a tipping point in that, of, like, where you're like, it's really cool the first time you go out on stage and the crowd goes nuts, right? And then is there a tipping point where you go, wait a minute, we thought they were going nuts because they thought what we were doing was so cool. And then you find out that, oh, wait a minute, maybe they're going nuts because they're just, it's like the celebrity part of it, and it, like you the thing we saw, and there, I think it's John Lennon says in it, he goes, it got to a point where it wasn't about it had nothing to do with music. It was like the freak show of the Beatles. Can you actually, let me ask you this way. Let's just for a moment, let's take that as a given. Let's say that is we're going to agree that that's what was happening. Is there a way to combat that? Like, can you pull an audience? Like, it's so hard to get an audience in the first place. It's always been tough, right? Their dream has come true in that regard, in some ways, you could argue, right? Can you pull an audience back in another direction?
I feel like the industry likes to present these musicians as like, and they like to put them on pedestals. So it's really hard to like, kind of like, people will look at them and be like, they're 100 times better than everyone and everything, just because they've got like 100 million streams on Spotify now.
Sure.
Let's just say that, like, and that's what happens. So it's kind of hard to like drag it back a little bit in that sense.
So, okay, let's run with that for a second. Let's say an artist hits some kind of wall, either creatively, personally, psychologically, whatever. Something occurs, and they're like, if I don't make a change, if I don't pull them back somehow, millions of hits on Spotify or YouTube or wherever notwithstanding, is there a point where they just have to do it anyway? And is that a risk? Like, how do you separate, I guess is what I'm asking. How do you separate the realities of your own artistic drive or interests versus the fan base?
I think what you said about like trying to pull the audience back to music, I think in the Beatles case, there was an attempt at that because, their music kind of changed in between their albums, and then with Lonely Hearts, it kind of took a different shape. And I felt like this is completely assumption. I might not know what I'm talking about, but I felt like there was if they could change a little bit and modify what they're doing, maybe the people who liked them so much before would kind of like distance themselves from their new stuff, which I feel like happens a lot now. Like, you follow someone for all their albums and then they release a new one and you don't like it as much and you stop following them. So I think maybe
Right.
the change in style a little bit could have been an attempt to separate that, but I just don't think it worked because it was such, the albums continued to be so good.
So wait, so your premise is if they could have done something that maybe didn't excite fans, that might have actually worked to their advantage in a way?
Well, something that was just different, that could focus it on the actual music they were making instead of like the Beatles as an icon, right? Like, something that maybe the giant fan base of people who like them as a, icon or whatever wouldn't
Right.
like, well, this new music doesn't interest me, so the Beatles don't mean as much to me anymore. But I think that I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying
No,
anymore.
no. It's an interesting point. I guess I'm fascinated by this notion too. You sort of alluded to it, of, is that universal to the Beatles, or is that like could Taylor Swift pull, an audience away? Because I mean, she releases albums and there's a lot of variety there, and you hear people, you read it in reviews and stuff. This is terrible, and why would she do that? You know what I mean? And they're constantly, the people that are furious that she left the sort of country music initial uh, whatever style, theme, and approach she had, and then she decided she was going to be a pop star. Like she made a conscious decision. I'm going to be a pop star now. Which in some respects you could argue, wow, the ability to actually make that declaration and then go execute it. But I just mean, she pulled it away. But there are people who like don't like anything she's done in the last probably 10 years because of that shift. On the other hand, she's one of the biggest stars ever. Does it matter? Do you think she cares?
I think that artists shouldn't have to constantly cater to like mass audiences and
Okay.
should kind of trust their own drive rather than, constantly thinking about what is my large audience as a whole going to want from me.
Okay. I'm going to devil's advocate for you for a second. And I'm going to say it this way, but you got to eat. And not to be funny, but I mean, so because I actually think there's a lot of merit in what you're saying, Tallulah. Where's the line? And where is that? Okay, so let's take your premise for a second as it relates to this conversation about fame and success and everything else. But where's the line? Because okay, yeah, you can say I'm only going to follow my heart in this. I'm only going to follow my instincts, my creative whatever. And I think there's a lot to that. I think there's a lot of good merit to that. But then how do you balance that against like how far should you push that? How far is too far?
I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think it could be different for each individual artist. Like it's very subjective. Like what do you want to accomplish with your music career?
Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts about that? Mr. Montgomery, I'm guessing you got something?
Yeah. Yeah. To hop on that, I think like Tyler the Creator is a great example. Like he has constantly like changed his creative work in a style that he's always just like wanted to do. He doesn't really like cater it to his fan base. He's more like, this is what I like. And if my fans like it, cool. If they don't, like it doesn't affect him as a person because it's music that he wants to make. And I think there's a lot of other artists like that, like the Neptunes and like other producers like that as well. And I think it works in that sense of like, if that's what they want to do and they're like, I want to make this music, that's good. Because I mean, Tyler the Creator also just blew up within like the past like 4 to 5 years. Like before that, he like none of his stuff was played on the radio. And like the first time his like music was played on the radio, he like blew it.
Sure. Did he, and I don't know, and I know of him, I don't know enough about him. Did he essentially do his thing and keep it the way it had always been, and then just he found the right person to push it and it became popular? Or was he constantly changing it and evolving it, trying to figure out a way to crack that magic code that got him the airplay and the recognition and everything else?
Well, mostly for him, I think it wasn't really like the goal was to really like get it on the radio. The goal was just to continue to make music that he likes.
Okay.
In the end, and then like he had a fan base from the beginning and like has like significantly more fans now since it is more publicized today, but it's mostly just like changed organically for the most part. Like most of his like, I mean, if you listen to like all his albums, like they're all kind of similar, and like if you listen from like his very first album to like his newest album, like you can see the development and change like over time.
Okay. Does the artist owe anything to the audience? Like, do they have to give them anything? Outside of the if you give them nothing, you're not going to be able to pay your bills and you want to live and survive. I mean, just, I'm thinking of another example. I'm thinking of like Bob Dylan. Dylan's amazing. He's arguably one of the greatest songwriters ever. But if you go see him in concert, he does not talk to the audience. There's no, it's like you go to see him in concert because of his music, and that's what he gives you. Now, there have been times throughout his career where that's been different, but I saw him a couple of years ago, and it was amazing. He didn't talk to the audience, like, at all. He talked to the band. Like, I was amused at the way he would, like, he would play a song, and crowd would go crazy, and it was great. And he like, there wasn't even like a thank you. It was just he would like do like one of those like head nods or a bow kind of thing. And then he would go and tell the band, or in between, like in an instrumental break, that they would do that between the songs. He was going around to the band members and telling them what the next song was. And you could see this evolve. The joke I made to my friend that when we were at the thing, I leaned over to him, I said, I think what's happening here is that Dylan has got this really long joke. And what's happening is between each song, he tells another little piece of the joke, and the concert's going to end when he gets to the punchline, and then the band's going to leave. Like, they're going to get the end of the joke, and then they're going to leave. Like you had no idea what he was saying. You had no idea what was going on. And he never once talked about, like, he did some of his like classic songs. Like, he did this very, very cool but different version of like Blowing in the Wind, and he did a whole bunch of songs that were very recognizable, but he did them in a different sort of way. But he didn't tell you why. He didn't tell you what inspired them. He just played them. And now that's become the norm for him. So that's why I'm wondering if you can pull an audience back, or do you just have to be so good that people are willing to say, I don't like the way that they do this, but I'm still such a fan that I'll suck it up and I'll put up with this behavior because I just love the music so much.
I don't think it's so much putting up with. Like, personally, I kind of trust, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I trust like an artist drive. Like,
Okay.
there's probably a reason behind why they're doing stuff. Like, for example, Frank Ocean, he doesn't communicate a lot with fans or doesn't have that many tours, but he's like massively successful. And I think between a lot of people. So I think it's up to the artist, and they can probably pull it off however they want to because they know how to do it.
Okay. I love the idea of the artist just doing the thing for the sake of the art, which is, I feel like, kind of what you're saying. And I love that as a concept, and I wish everybody pursued their creative drive in that capacity. Is that what you think happens? I mean, like, is that where the music industry is nowadays, though? And I'm not saying that's like argumentatively. I don't know.
I think on the topic of the Beatles, it's like, we were talking about if they regretted stopping touring or whatever, but like, I think any decision they made at that point was purely creative because they'd amassed so much fame and so much wealth. They were set. Like, they didn't need to continue, like you said, to eat. They were fine. So I think at that
okay.
point, there is the question of like, do you owe fans anything? But I think kind of money is, not part of the picture anymore. I mean, unless they really wanted to continue to pursue money instead. But at that point, if you have that much fame, it's like it's all about creativity, I would think.
But there's lots of art. I mean, I think there's a reason why an enormous number of artists have some pretty serious issues with depression and a lot of other like interpersonal relationships that just collapse. And they're wealthy. It's not like they're hurting for money. And the perspective of most of us is like, I'd love to have your problems, and yet they're miserable. And that's, what I mean? So I bring up the money from a standpoint of like, it's a shame when you hear about an artist who had done really well, makes poor financial choices, and then they're like working at like, some sort of like, retail gig because they've got to pay their bills. It's the only way they can do it. And I don't begrudge them that. I'm not making fun of them. I'm not in any way saying there's anything, like they're bad people because of it. I just mean the circumstances. And then you think about like, this person was traveling all over the world and what I mean? And it was famous and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. It's like a hard balancing act, I would think, to figure all that out. And Madison, I want to get you in on this because I know You haven't been, although you're in the other classes, so you didn't see the documentary we're talking about. So I realized that there's a little, you're a little bit of a disadvantage, but, and even though your class didn't watch the documentary, something tells me you have some thoughts on this topic. Here's the question I have, and it doesn't even have to be the Beatles, but let's say any significant artist of the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. Is the game itself different now so radically that the things that the Beatles were dealing with are almost irrelevant? Or the things, bless you, the things that like an artist in the I don't know, let's say the difference between say 5 to 10 years ago versus say 20, 30, 40 years ago, because of the way music is distributed or accessed or consumed, are the issues that we've been talking about, are they even relevant really in a 20, well, let's hold off on bringing the pandemic into this for a moment. Let's pretend that we're having this conversation a year ago when the pandemic wasn't, causing the havoc that it's caused. Is it even the same thing?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, like music has changed drastically over these past like 5 or 10 years, even. But like you look back onto the Beatles and their songs, and then you look at someone like Taylor Swift. Like that music is so different. I mean, yeah, maybe they're, I don't know. I don't even know what I was trying to say, but just because music has changed so much, it's not. I don't know what I'm trying to get at.
Well, okay, well, no, hold on, but let's go with this for a second. Is it reasonable to think that a fan, a listener, experiences discovering a group in the same way or an artist in the same way you would have in say the mid 60s? Are there parallels in that experience or are those completely gone now?
Personally, I think the experience is all different because there's different types of media now, different types of production, and all like different types of sources you can receive, your music. So I think it's probably completely different.
But is it different enough to change the inherent moment of I love this stuff? You know, like whatever that thing is that gets you to say I identify or I enjoy or I whatever it is that fundamentally any different than it was say, in the 1960s or pick any time? Or has the way that music works as an industry now, has it changed so much that it's actually changed the discovery experience?
I mean, yeah, it's changed over the years, but I don't think it makes it any less powerful, Music will always be just an amazing way to communicate. So I'm just thinking like you go way back to like classical music. People had to like there were only live performances, but they were always performed by like top tier people.
Right.
Nowadays we have like the luxury of just being able to have access to pretty much any song at our fingertips, But it makes also the discovery more intimate, because then you discover it on your own time and you find it yourself, right? So I think like
But
it's we'll go on.
No, please finish. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay, because I was just gonna say that like it's just because it's changed doesn't make it any less more powerful.
Okay, but like I guess I'm wondering like it's so disposable now in some ways. Like yeah, you have more access and you have that more intimate moment because you discovered on your own, but you also have the possibility of not being exposed at all because 100 years ago when I was your age, I was subjected largely to whatever the DJ decided to play. The idea of a playlist, what the heck is a playlist? I don't know what a playlist is. It didn't exist. There wasn't even an option. I didn't have alternative methods or alternative access of any kind. And that trade-off is something, I mean, this is a whole separate podcast discussion in class discussion, but that trade-off of access versus exposure, because yeah, you can get anything now, pretty much. Any recording that was ever made, you can find somewhere without leaving your home. But there used to be great joy. I wish I could take you guys, forgetting about the pandemic, these things were gone before that. I wish I could take you guys as a program to an actual record store, to like go into like where there's bins of vinyl records, real vinyl records too, by the way, not these like silly little, like we're going to take a digital source and put it on some vinyl for you and tell you it's vinyl and charge you like insane amounts of money. I'm going to get off my soapbox. The point is, it's a very different experience. You don't know what you're going to find in those bins necessarily. You don't know, you're going to discover something like, whoa, what is this thing? The number of albums that I would find accidentally because somebody had put it in the wrong bin or whatever at a store I was going to, or whatnot. I mean, I can't, I've lost count. But I don't know how you do that now. I don't know how to do that. And I'm not, and okay, and I know I'm going to there's going to be like 1,000 boomer jokes. I hate when you guys do that. I also hate the word hate, but that's a separate thing. But no, seriously, I don't know how to make that happen on my phone. And as far as I know, nobody's got an algorithm for when you're doing Spotify or Apple Music or Google or Pandora's the closest one that I know of. But it's not like that visceral moment of just like you don't know what you don't know. Now you'd be like, I like this thing. I'm going to listen to more of that. Play me stuff that's closely related to that, and it'll do it. In fact, that's all it does. The suggestions, it takes everything you play, and it goes in and it goes, well, we categorize all that stuff here because so we're going to pick this for you. And then there's this whole other world of stuff that you don't even know exists.
I think that's still there to discover. Like you can still go to record shops and have that experience. Just because there's like new media types doesn't mean you can't go back to old ones and records
I'm not
are
saying
really
you
popular right now.
can't.
So
Well, yeah, it is kind of, but it's still like not on the degree. I don't know. I worry about the demise of the DJ in all seriousness. Like I feel like that's hurt the growth of music creatively.
I really agree with your idea of like, the experience of like finding something new that you really like that's kind of out of what you usually listen to. And I think I still experience that a lot just because I think maybe it takes more of an effort. You have to go out of your way to like, something I do a lot is like put on an 80s, 90s station. And then just when I hear a song I like, I'll download it and then I can go back to it on a playlist like that and then discover albums I like through that or even recommended albums that I get for albums I listen to. A lot of the times they're similar in ways, but some of my favorite albums I found are like, it's crazy to think how they even related two albums to each other, but it's just perfectly curated, weirdly.
Can you give an example?
There's this girl that Tallulah and I listened to, Julia Jacqueline, and I'd been listening to her for like a year and a half, and then I went under her and like I scrolled down and it had this album called The Navigator, which is like my favorite album of all time that I've ever found. And it's this like, Julia Jacqueline's this Australian woman who's in her 20s. And Hooray for the Riff Raff, the album I found is this like Puerto Rican American woman in New York making music on her own, and she was on the run. It's just this totally different experience, different style of music. And it's like my favorite album I've ever listened to. So like,
that's great.
And I understand like not wanting to listen to the same types of things over and over again, which I definitely do because you get recommended stuff like that. But even in some of those situations, I found just drastically different things and just like fallen in love with.
Okay. No, that's cool. Maybe it doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe it is just simply that you have to be willing to make the effort to find the other stuff, as opposed to before where it kind of was naturally occurring.
I think it does sort of naturally occur, especially in social media. Like you're just naturally subjected to, um, at least me, like for me, I know I'm always subjected to like different artists and stuff through social media. Like I'll find them, like I'll find their account or something. It's not always like specifically tailored to you, like Lizzie was saying. It's it's kind of they kind of know that like that these, Spotify and Apple Music and such. I think they just kind of have a way of there is a randomness to it. Like it's just suited for you.
Okay. Maybe that's getting better. I've just always felt like things get very, I don't know, boxed in.
I mean, I feel like you're only boxed in if you follow just the algorithm. If you just press shuffle or like let it do all of its recommended work, then it's like you're very boxed in. You don't have any like effort to it. Like what I like to do is go onto Bandcamp, scroll through there hundreds of genres, and just pick one and just see what comes up. That's how I explore my songs. Because I don't know, I got really.
Have you experienced anything that you were like, my goodness, what is this?
Totally. I clicked the experimental tab, and I started listening to experimental music and was like blown away. At first it was stupid, right? Because it was just noise. And then as I listened to it, I was like, dude, this is like serious stuff, So I got really into it. And then I went down a rabbit hole, and then, I just do weird little musical journeys like that. And that's what I like doing, like that's the organicness that I find at it. And it's still like at the ease of your fingertips. It's the same kind of thing I bet that feels whenever you go to, I like to go to Goodwill and go look at all the records and all the stuff they have there, It's the same thing. And it's always just a fun treat if you find something you like, and it's the same now, just in a different form.
Okay. I'm going to wrap this episode up with this question. I want to go around and get your opinions on this then. Flip what Jaden just talked about. Flip it so that instead of as a listener, think of it as a creator. And I'll even grant you, it doesn't even have to be musical creation. It could be anything. Poet, visual artist, architect, whatever. But this idea of, it was when you said the word, I went down a rabbit hole of just seeing what would happen. My question is, because again, this is a whole nother podcast topic we do. We've like hit like 18 tangents. I know, big surprise with me facilitating. My question is, as a creator, is it for you personally, how do you go down that rabbit hole? Is it just a matter of saying, you know what, I'm going to pursue this for my own pursuit, and if people like it, great, and if they don't, they don't? Is it just simply coming to terms with that? Do you have to balance it against something else? Is the risk worth it? How do you flip that as a creator? That idea of just free exploration?
I think the only limitation is your time. Because if you put in the effort, right, to find something new and explore something that's never been done before, and if you don't like it, all you did was just like waste, I don't know, a couple hours trying something new. But you learned from it. So I don't feel like it's wasting anything, But if you're trying
So what if you're, wait, hold on.
Okay, go on.
What if you're a quote successful artist and you do that and you find something that you feels viable and then your fan base goes, no?
Then so be it. Then that's not the fan base that I want. That's not the fan base that I need, right? The fans who would legitimately enjoy my music will come. I might lose other people that I might have already found to like my music, It's like, all right, if you like my music, you can listen to my past stuff. I'm going to start on a new genre, and then new people will join on to the ride,
Does your answer change if I tell you you got to figure out a way to pay for your car, your apartment, your food, your insurance, your whatever?
Slightly. I mean, I think I would do enough to just like get by, but it also depends on how I'm living. If I'm living homeless and I'm okay with living homeless, then so be it. I'll do whatever I want. You know what I mean?
Okay. So you have a kid and you have a spouse. I'm not sure. I know it seems like I'm just trying to like
I see
throw
what you're
things,
trying to say.
but like, where's the line?
I think you can always add reasons why you can't do something, or you can always add reasons why you can't. You can always say more like, oh, I can't do this because of this, or oh, I can't do this because of this. I think you just kind of have to do stuff sometimes.
Okay. Good. That's what I was waiting for. Good. 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 Not that my acknowledgement of that being good means anything, but for what it's worth. Jay, what do you think?
I feel like just like as a creator, like wait, are we assuming I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm just saying like the idea of exploring creatively, going down those rabbit holes. You know, it's one thing as a listener to say, I'm going to randomly select a thing and just see what comes up. How do you flip that around as a creator?
Or as a creator, I think it's always important to keep on expanding out of your comfort zone and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like always like trying to add something new to what you're writing. Like when I write something, like I might just like write, like I'll get it down, and then next time I play it, I'm gonna add something new or take something out and completely change it. And so, yeah.
What if the audience says, "Yeah, it's cute, don't like it"? Same questions. What then?
Well, I'm just gonna keep on going on. Like, there's
Okay,
always multiple. Oh,
no,
sorry.
that's fair. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Or there's always like multiple roads to go down in terms of like making music. And if I like it, then I might still change it, but I might try and make it better and change it like that.
Okay.
But
What if it starts to impact your ability to pay your bills?
if it starts to impact my ability to pay bills, then I'd probably just I'll still keep on doing what I want to do, but I might just also make stuff that people also want to listen to.
Okay. Interesting. Almost like you're running two careers simultaneously if you have to.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. No, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just curious as we're ending up. Mr. Montgomery, what do you think? This is good.
I mean, I'm all about going down the rabbit hole. I mean, I was very much like that. I mean, just like at ASU, I was not one to be like, oh, like I love playing Beethoven all the time on bassoon. Like I was like, please no, like absolutely not. But like that
Nothing
like
wrong
was
with Beethoven on the
no,
bassoon.
there's nothing wrong with it. And like honestly, I enjoy listening to it. But like for me, I was just like playing it like that is like the norm of bassoon playing. Like, and I was like, no, like this isn't really like what I want to do. And I had plenty of conversations with Dr. Albie about it. He was like, okay, cool. Like, I get that's not what you want to do. So like, I'll show you more like contemporary stuff and things like that. So that was my primary focus, and I enjoyed it. And like going into like my senior recital, it was very like contemporary, like jazz, things like that. And I had a great time performing it. And like one of the pieces, like someone out who like doesn't listen to music could have been like, what was that? Like that just sounded like random noise. And it's fine because they were like, that's not really the music for them. It was really music, like if that's music people want to listen to, like cool. Like if it's that doesn't appeal to them, like that's also perfectly fine. So I'm all about like going down the rabbit hole and doing like what you really want to do.
There was a reason why we had you as a student teacher this year. Madison, what do you think?
Well, I think like if you're creating something and you have a bunch of people who are used to what you do and they like it, but you go into a different like you go in a different direction with what you're doing and they don't like it, then I honestly wouldn't care. Because you're still gonna have people who are gonna like it. Like no matter what you do, they're gonna stick with you. Like yeah, you're gonna lose a bunch of people, but you're gonna keep people who will stick with you no matter what goes on with your experience.
Okay, that's fair. And if there's enough of them, the idea obviously would be that that sustains you from a practical standpoint, I suppose. Okay, Lizzie, you're up.
I think that the audience you're talking to we can't really visualize the monetary side of making music, especially in this program. I think for a lot of us, it's just about, you know, release of what we want to make and whatever, you know. So I think it's harder for at least me personally, I guess, to understand why you would do something creative like this if you think the demand isn't what you want to keep making, right? Like, I think it's just a different type of career than something else. I mean, I guess the same for any job. If you decide that you have to make a change in your life and it's not suiting you anymore, you change it. And I think, you know, if it doesn't work out, you change it again. But I think that's just the process of a lot of things, right? Like, you have to make things work for you one way or another if you want to succeed in the way you want to succeed.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. It's good. Tallulah, you get the last word.
Kind of just to bounce off of what Lizzie was saying, I think it's kind of like, I mean, it's just the concept of Darwinism. Like, you kind of just adapt because you have to, you know. And I guess you have your examples that don't adapt, and you know, some musicians do really poorly when they switch something up. But as a whole, if they're switching something up, it probably means they felt like they had to, or they want to, or you know, there's some sort of drive pushing them to do that. So I think people just know what's best for themselves. So yeah.
There's a phrase that a lot of artists use, trust the process. And maybe, you know, maybe that's what it is. But then I also think about, to be fair, I think about artists who, this will be my closing thought, I guess, is I think about artists who deliberately say, I'm going to do this differently and either come along for the ride or not, but I'm doing it differently. David Bowie literally created personas, and you know, in one persona it was a certain style, and in other personas it was another style, and yeah, they're all linked through and you can see there's a connection because it's all the same performer, but he kind of encapsulates different things based on those personas, right? You know, our friend Alice Cooper literally has a separate presence on stage. He's a different person. You know, there's the Alice Cooper on stage, and then there's the Alice Cooper that you actually might meet, you know, out and about in Phoenix at some point. And it's a very different guy, you know. And there's tons of examples of that. And I again, it's interesting getting your perspective on it. It's actually encouraging getting your perspective on it, that you guys are committed to the idea of you root the decision in the art as a and bring the audience to it rather than, you know, trying to get to the audience at all costs, because most of society seems to be pushing the second one. They just want the audience, you know. And if it's going against their creative instincts, so be it, but I got the audience and the fame and the, you know, that whole bit. But that's yet another conversation for another podcast. So that in mind, I want to thank Lizzie and Madison and Tallulah and Mr. Montgomery and Jaden and Jay for joining me today. I so love that we get to have these conversations, and I'm so glad that as a program, we've continued to do stuff through this pandemic, because that's becoming a thing, you know? And hopefully, you know, at some point in the not too distant future, we'll be back to whatever in the world normal means. And we'll be able to do this with everybody in the room, you know, huddled around. You remember how we used to do things like this and we just have everybody kind of like around a couple of microphones, like sitting in a circle and just like chatting and whatever? I long for that day. pretty much it's evenly tied with when we can have an audience on in this place with the soundstage. Another conversation. Thank you all so much for listening. We will be back next week. We will have a live concert on Thursday at 2:30 and another live podcast at 2:30 on Friday. I'm hopeful to see some more of these folks in both of those performances. A few of them were actually on the bill on our last show, and hopefully we'll do some more of those with everybody else. Hint, 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 hint. Some of you more than others. Just saying. Anyway, have a great afternoon, everybody, and we will see you next time. Check us out at arcadiacmas.com when you get a chance. Bye-bye, everyone.